Good morning, I believe, everybody. I'm the presenter. My name is Igor Skibickij. Some of you might know me, as I see a couple of familiar people in the attendance, either from our previous webinars or from the industry. So we are some 5 minutes away from the start, and we're just gonna wait a few more minutes for the other people to join. And I see we have already a decent number of people who are in the room, currently some 30 connected. Actually, we had a morning session for the Eastern Hemisphere, for Australia and Asia. So at that time, I think at the peak we had 35. So let's see if we can beat the morning session in attendance. Before we start, and just to use a little bit of the time for the housekeeping notes, I'm just gonna share a few practical information that you might as well see on your screen. So firstly, we advise to use Google Chrome as a default browser for this session. On the other hand, if everything is working, then no need to change, just consider. All the attendees are automatically muted for the purpose of a smooth presentation. So I'll be the only speaker on the audio. However, everybody is encouraged to ask questions either in the chat tab or in the questions tab that you can see on the right hand of your screen, that you can hide as well, or you can bring it up. Depends whether you want to go a little bit wider screen for the slides that I'll be sharing. So yeah, questions are encouraged, and I'll leave some time towards the end of this session, which shouldn't last more than some 40 minutes, as I have about 25 slides to go through and data to share with you. So we'll leave a few minutes at the end for any potential questions. Also, I should mention that a recording of this webinar will be made available almost immediately after this session concludes. So for anyone who is not able to join this session or needs to leave early or would like to share it with some of your colleagues or industry friends, you will have the link that will be made accessible to you. And we are also happy to provide the slides of the PowerPoint presentation, so the deck that I have uploaded on my screen right now. Also, we have a few colleagues in attendance from our company. They will be happy to answer any technical questions or in case you face any issues. In the morning, we had a little bit trouble with the audio, even though the internet connection should be firm and stable, but we experienced occasional dropouts of the audio. So should that happen, I'm just gonna pause for a few seconds until it improves. Don't hesitate to write or to let me know. I believe my colleagues will also notify me in case we run into any difficulties, but it should be fairly stable, so fingers crossed for that. And yeah, I guess we can just wait a few more minutes. We have 36 people at the moment, so still some of them joining. And in a few minutes, we will kick off this session. So feel free to make yourself comfortable. You can read the news in the meantime or check what's going on in the industry. And I will start in a bit. Okay, we still have people joining. We are over 40 now, so officially we already beat the morning session in attendance. So let's hope it stays. And should be just a few more minutes until we kick off. I feel like a news anchor waiting to start my broadcast. So anticipation. And yeah, thank you for the morning wishes. It's lovely to hear from all of you. We have a very pleasing, polite crowd of people gathered. According to statistics, we have some 85% people in attendance representing either universities or colleges, mostly for higher education. We also have a couple of industry associations, few service providers. So it's a good mix, mostly from the Western Hemisphere, considering the time of this session. I'll repeat that everybody is muted. Only myself will be on the audio for the whole period of this presentation. And yeah, feel free to post any questions that you might be interested at into the chat or the questions tab. Good. Well, we are almost 50 strong at this point. So it's probably just one more minute until we start, not to keep everybody waiting unnecessarily too long. I understand you are busy. You have your whole day ahead of you, most of you. Those in Europe probably concluding, but certainly don't mean to overextend the session. So yeah. All right, we are just 50. I consider that a positive sign. So I'm gonna start, and I'll hide my chat bar so that I can see the full screen of my slides over here. Not the full screen, that's right. Okay. Good. So one more time, good morning and good afternoon to everybody joining from the Western Hemisphere, from the Europe, or from other corners of the world. Thank you very much for coming for this session. And I would like to welcome you for another webinar series that we are covering. It is a pleasure for me to be the host of this session and the presenter. My name is Igor Skibickij. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of BONARD, which is formerly known as Student Marketing. We rebranded in February. So for some of you, this might be the new name, our new corporate name. However, most of you might know us under the previous business name. The title of my presentation is called 2019 China Agency Market Annual Update. And the purpose of this presentation is to share our in-house agent or agency data on the Chinese agent market that recently underwent a large nationwide update. So it is a research that has been actually going on for the past 7 years. And we have, over the course of these 7 years, we have made 3 significant revisions of our internal agent database, their records and their, let's say, key performing indicators. And we thought it might be actually an interesting opportunity to share some of this interesting data with the colleagues and friends in the industry, since it is an interesting topic. And frankly, there is not so much information or clear, tangible information when it comes to the agency market in China. So things like how many agents are there actually, how many of them are visible, how many of them are active or accessible to work with, to visit, where are they, how many agencies per city, how old are they, which countries, which programs they promote. These are some of the things that I will cover in my slides. So without further ado, I'll probably dive into it. Very briefly, a little bit about us for those that are not so familiar. We are market research and market intelligence company operating in the international education field, but also in the real estate sector or in the student housing sector of real estate. That's where we mainly provide research or research-driven solutions and services to our clients. Some of them you might be seeing on this slide. So, as you will note, we mainly work with destinations, with governmental agencies, with associations, states, provinces, but also individual clients, educators as such. So people and establishments and companies from all walks of industry that are internationally active in student recruitment, that are trying to establish themselves in new markets or make themselves more competitive. And through our data advisory and strategic advisor, we are helping them to succeed in this particular endeavor. When it comes to this research, I would like to dedicate perhaps 2 minutes to the methodology, as we consider it important for the data context of this presentation. So, like I mentioned, this particular research has been going on for the past 7 years. We have started it in 2012. That's when we developed our first agency database in China. At the same time, when we became active in the market, when we have established a branch office there. At the beginning, only myself. At this point, it's 10 people and basically full company organigram with marketers, researchers, recruiters, working and assisting educators to succeed over there. This desktop research lasted since August 2018 until April 2019. So over the course of this research, we have basically updated and made a full overhaul of our agent database in China. What it means in terms of methodology, it's that it was a combination of two steps. We did a secondary research of all available information sources about agencies, particularly in the Chinese internet environment. So screening all major social media, all major search engines, industry catalogs, business registers, company registers, yellow pages, whatever we could get hands on in order to identify agencies, in order to further approach and verify and screen them and record them in our agent catalog. This was supplemented also by the primary research, where we used particular keywords to search and identify new agencies, like I mentioned, in search engines, in social media, on industry fora or study abroad related fora, in order to have a very complex and conclusive picture about the agent market. So this countrywide research essentially took us 119 cities to screen and cover. They are divided in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities, as you will further see. And it was a 3-stage process. At the beginning, we tried to collect new agencies or update information about existing ones, either through primary or secondary research. In the second stage, we proceeded to screen these agencies individually, each of them. And there were roughly 2,500 that we have found to have some sort of online footprint or online record. So that is usually either a website or social media account or some similar footprint online. And this helped us to ascertain whether they exist or not, whether they are active. And if we struggle there, to still determine whether they are actually active, live, operating. The third stage of it was calling. And we called 12 1,200 of these agencies, where we were not sure that the website is actually live, that there was no feedback or it wasn't organic or updated, in order to ascertain that they actually exist and are operating in the market. And this was carried out through a mystery shopping method. So presenting ourselves as potential customer to them. Another significant information I should mention is that I will be operating with terms agency or agent, depending on the form of speech. However, for the purpose of this research, we factored in both types of entities. So agencies are usually a bit more robust entities, either full companies, bigger sized, with offices, with branches, but also small businesses, so agencies. Also, we have factored in agents, which are smaller entities, usually not a full business, or might be appearing as one, but essentially it might be just a few individuals working together as a team of consultants, or even down to a single consultant level, as long as, again, this person was proven to be operating, active, catering to potential inquiries through the research steps that we carried out. So altogether, this is what formed the foundation of our database. 7 native Chinese researchers have worked on this project. It took us roughly 3,500 phone calls to identify and screen all these agencies, because we tried to call each of them at least 3 times until we gave up and considered them to be non-active and non-feasible for our records. We screened over 2,500 individual websites and social media platforms, and we spent almost 300 hours on this. So it's quite significant undertaking that we went through, and I'm thus more excited to share these research results with all of you. So when it comes to the structure of my slides, I would like to start and kick off with the domestic outlook, followed by the agency market, then agency profile, then destinations, and a couple of useful practical conclusions, and perhaps a Q&A session. So to start with, and to give it again a little bit of grounding and context, the agency market in China is the reflection of the byproduct of the study abroad demand. So of the demand of the Chinese parents, Chinese students to go study overseas. As you can see, the total number of mobile students abroad from China last year reached 869,000. So quite significant number, and China already established itself as the most robust source market. This is according to the UNESCO figures for all fields of study, for all types of education. According to the local sources provided by the Ministry of Education, the number of higher education students that participated in overseas higher education from China was reaching 662,000. So roughly 21% increase since 2016, roughly 10% growing on annual basis. For those of you particularly interested in ELT sector, it's interesting to know that China almost provides or caters to 2,000 million student weeks combined for all destinations abroad when it comes to ELT. So one of the key top 2 markets. And for the K-12, which is a booming sector for the past decade, the Chinese market accounts for roughly 90,000 student weeks. So in terms of sheer market size and volume, this is incredibly significant, and you will see that the Asian market is a reflection of that in the next couple of slides. In order for me to boil down through these figures, this is essentially what we call a funnel of the Chinese Asian market. So the first figure, 5,000 companies or individuals working in this industry in China. This is official estimate provided to us by the COSA Association, so the governmental agency of the Ministry of Education. By their estimate, it is estimated that there is at least 5,000 agencies, or related businesses in China that are vested in study abroad or student consulting. It is a significant number. And you might be asking, why is our number lower? Why do we have less? Which you can see in the next two following parts of this iceberg reversed. Is because they are very difficult to find. And in fact, we were able to successfully identify half of them, so 2,500 that had some sort of online presence, some digital footprint that gave us some information to work with, some contact numbers, some lead to follow to identify whether they exist. And we did. Out of these 2,500, we eventually, through this three-stage screening process, identified almost 1,200 that are active, that are unique. So not counting branches or sub-agencies or other offices around China. These are unique companies and head offices only, spread across those 119 cities that we have covered. So it is a significant number still. However, in the context and in perspective of the overall estimated number, it is just still tip of the iceberg. So like I said, our purpose for this presentation was to identify the more transparent, the more accessible, the more visible part of the agent market. The rest is in the shady area. So it's counselors, it's individual people, very small entities. It's difficult to know where they exist, how they operate, and so on. But these certainly represent the most transparent and most reliable part of the agent market. We are talking here about companies like New Oriental, Shinyway, all the way to the mid-sized and small-sized that have a footprint that responded. So altogether, they represent the better part of the agent market, if I can use that word. Next slides might pique your interest. This is essentially the distribution of this proportion of all agencies that you will see. So over here we have all the tier 1, tier 2, and selected tier 3 cities where we have agent records, and you can see basically the proportion between them. The interesting thing is that Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, they are still largely dominant. So they feature almost up to 100 agents per particular city. This is followed by roughly 30 tier 2, and some of them already called tier 1 cities. Those feature between 20 to 30 agencies, so they are significant and important and certainly should be visited if you are considering to travel to China more frequently or to start establishment your brand over there. However, you will notice also that there is a large proportion of smaller tier 3 cities which include only a handful of agents. So on average, it is less than 10 in some cases. And this is basically the new frontier. This is where most of the growth development will be happening in the future, probably over the next 50 years, where most of the economy, the capital, the human development will flow, foreign investments. So this is where the markets will continue growing and seizing a certain market share of that. So it's actually a fairly good map for you to navigate the Asian market and to determine where you should go next. So if you have already covered and have partners active in some of these bigger cities, whether traditional ones like Beijing or Shanghai, or maybe the tier 2 cities, you might consider investing efforts in the tier 3 cities as well and developing new market share over there. Similar slide or a similar map to that, however, expressing the overall quantity of agents in the provinces. So it's essentially a heat map. The darker the color, the larger proportion of agencies being headquartered over there. And again, you will notice a similar trend with the 4 traditional tier 1 cities occupying the largest market share. So 150 agencies. However, some provinces are particularly strong, like Guangdong province in the south, or the Jiangsu province neighboring Shanghai, or the neighboring Shandong province, which almost has 100 agents. or some further inward provinces that are not so robust, because you can see that essentially the Asian market grew around the coast where most of the economic development has been happening and the trade, but the inward provinces like Sichuan province or Hebei province or Hunan are also growing and attracting more study abroad demand, and the agency market is starting to reflect that. The next slide concerns the dynamics of the Asian market. So when we analyzed the data and we compared it with our records for the past 7 years, so in 2012 and 2019, we actually found that, interestingly, the number of agents as such did not significantly increase between 2012 and 2019. There were still roughly 1,200 agencies that were on our record back in 2012 and in 2019. And we were wondering, how is that? However, it is through the screening that we identified what happened, and that is represented by the middle gray bar. So there is 543 agencies that we have learned ceased to exist. So this is roughly 47% of the overall Asian market back in 2012. And they were replaced by the new ones that you can see in the orange bar, represented in the orange bar. So almost 600 new agencies have been established over the course of those 7 years. It could have been breakaway agencies after deregulation that happened in 2017 and has been going on for the past 5 years as of 2012. It could have been simply more desire to expand the market as a response to the growing study abroad student numbers, and so on. So really the market is dynamic. On one hand, we see closures of agencies, so it is consolidating, it is developing. On the other hand, there is new growth and new continuation of the agency market, driven by these new guys that have been established for the past 7 years and are still relatively young. However, already attain a significant overall market share. So from our records, they almost represent the half of the Asian market. Over here, you can see the agency profile slide. So mainly the main information is the year of establishment. It was one of the KPIs that we tried to identify, as it's mostly available. However, in case of some half of these agencies, we could not identify it, so they do not share it, most likely because they are still young companies. And in China, being a young company is considered maybe that the agency is not yet firm enough or not strong enough. So in other words, they don't show it. On the other hand, out of those 698 that we identified, their year of establishment, surprisingly 73% were established before 2010. So it's already they already have a significant amount of years and experience behind them, if we can count the decade as a decent span of time to establish a market share and experience. What is interesting here is the two cycles that you see forming. So one happened at the break of millennia in 2000. This is where many of the agencies have actually established. It could have been response to sudden economic drive or economic factors or demographic factors. The baby boomers might have attained the age of studying abroad. So it's a mix of things. It's difficult to really understand, but it's certainly a reflection of economic demographic changes that have been going on in China. And the second boom happened in 2012, where another 55 agencies have been established within almost a year. And it's a 10-year cycle. So this could have been because the regulation has come and they needed to establish fast in order to become legally active and to gain access to the social media, to the major recruitment channels, and so on. So this cycle suggests there might be a third spike. We are nearing that period, as we are possibly nearing the financial crisis. So we might be nearing the spike in the Asian market again, which could be on the positive note. and might suggest that there will be again a large number of new agencies that will be establishing in order to attain more market share following the deregulation of the Asian market. Further on, here you can see the correlation between the years of establishment and the size. So as you will notice, again, through the cycles, the gray agencies, which represent small with one office, according to our differentiation, have attained a certain growth and certain size. In 2000, they started gradually becoming either light blue, which is mid-sized, or big, which is the dark blue. And then again, many small agencies established at the break of millennia, and following this pattern, started to grow the mid-sized and the big sized, which peaked again in 2012. So we might see a similar trend of those that were established in 2012. Many young ones might be attaining a new market size, a new market share, either taking a certain proportion of the market or becoming IPOs, as we have witnessed with the biggest agents to date. Here is the breakdown of the different sizes in slightly different expressions. So in a nutshell, out of the overall agent market in our record, 73% of it is dominated by small agencies, which have one office on average. So it's a relatively surprising figure. And it actually, what it means is that for institutions that have difficulty to partner with large agencies because they don't have such a strong value proposition or ranking, or such popular majors as they are in demand in China, you have to be very active. You have to be very busy in China because you have to visit as many of these small ones as you can. And since they are small agents, they don't have such strong sending numbers. They send students in lower dozens or lower tens annually. So you have to be very shotgun, very broad in your approach, and visit as many of those 119 cities that we feature as part of this research. On the other hand, you can focus on the mid-sized market, where agencies send numbers in hundreds, and they represent a decent mix between expectations and flexibility of gaining new programs on board. And there is a proportion of the big market, I see percentage is missing, but this could be roughly 10%, that are really represented by the big guys. So the likes of New Oriental, JJL, EIC, those with at least 50 or more branches across China. They send students in thousands, and even securing a strategic deal with one of them might open the whole market for you and secure a large market share. If you are successful, if you know who to meet, if you are persistent, and if you factor in the time that it takes to actually convince such big agency to work with you. So this is, again, a very systematic, very strategic, targeted approach in case you decide to work with the big agents. So two kinds of approaches, either to focus on many small ones or to focus on a small percentage of big ones and be very strategic in the approach. Over here, it is a similar correlation. So you will see the representation of offices. I should have mentioned that these 1,200 agencies that we have on record, we found that altogether they have 3,000 offices around China. So all their branches, sub-branches, sub-agencies, anything we could find about how many other offices they have on record. And you will see that the small ones, there is 873 of them in China. So these are the head offices only, because it's a single office. So a considerable market share, but in exchange for smaller volume of students. Then the middle share, the middle-sized agents, they have roughly the 3 times the number of branches as head offices. And then the big ones, where the correlation is the biggest. So on average, you will see that every big agent roughly has at least 14 to 15 offices around China. So like I said, partnering with a few big ones could easily lead you to establishing a lot of presence in China if you are successful in that pursuit, and if you're able to gain access and support of visiting their branches, training the counselor staff, and deploying your program across the whole market. We have seen such strategic deals occur in the market. We actually we're part of some facilitating and helping educators to achieve such market share, but it is a very long and difficult process. There's a lot of trust involved. There's a lot of negotiation just in order to gain such access, since especially big agencies are very overprotective of their market share and their brand, because they face so much competition from these smaller guys that seem to be growing very rapidly and taking a lot of the market share in their favor. Whenever I go to China and I speak to big agencies, the likes of New Oriental, JJL, EIC, they all sort of look at me and frowning that, you know what, like the last couple of years were really not good. A lot of competition, a lot of competitors, especially from smaller mid-sized agents, and we are losing market share, they're telling us. So there is certainly an opportunity to be gained in that. However, this is the dynamics that one should understand, whether he wants to focus on the big or the small agencies, and what it means in terms of challenges, finding them, working with them. A little bit fast forward, so I don't get too caught up in my thoughts. Over here, you can see the snapshot of the biggest ones. We selected them in no particular order, just their business names and their cities according to their legal address of the head office. So in fact, some of their main offices or the biggest offices could be in other cities, but this is where they are legally addressed as having been established. So Beijing, very dominant, with almost 50 agents, followed by Shanghai and southern province of Guangdong. Further on, here you can see the destinations. So what it means is that when we screen these agents, we in fact try to identify which countries are most represented or which destinations are most represented in their portfolio. So whenever we would identify USA or Australia or New Zealand, we would make a mark in our database, and knowing that this agency actually focuses on these countries and has institutions promoting that are based in these destinations. So the useful information for those of you, obviously the main four destinations remain strong as ever. USA largely dominant, followed by UK, and then Australia and Canada are sort of competing for the third spot. And then there is a big gap between the rest of the market. So Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia and East Asia has been traditionally strong and is even growing more rapidly than the traditional destinations that might be losing some of this student volume because either of the visa regulation or the post-study work opportunities not being feasible for Chinese students, or the political climate, or terrorist attacks. So all these things are very susceptible to the Chinese market and the Chinese customer. And Asia is considered to be oftentimes a safer choice and more affordable as such as well. Moving on, still to stay a little bit on this topic, here you can see the correlation between the proportion of agents that actually promote a particular destination versus the remaining agents that do not promote such destination, because we could not identify any institutions being represented from such destinations. In case of USA, it's roughly one quarter of agencies not representing USA or not promoting USA against the other 3/4 that are strongly promoting US institutions. In UK, it's roughly 1/3. For Australia, it's almost half-half. So half of the agents promoting Australia, the other half not, and represent a potential opportunity to seize market share. And for Canada, this is probably the most feasible ground for establishing Canada or Canadian institutions as partner institutions for the local agencies. So Canada has probably most of the potential to grow over here, followed by Australia, and US, UK have to compete for the market share with the existing agents. Other useful takeaways that we have learned, just to share with you, some 750 agencies promote higher education programs only. So we did not identify any other programs in their portfolio, such as K-12 or ELT or study tours. That means you have to be, again, very selective whether you will be spending energy with agents that are, and if you are, let's say, ELT operator or junior operator, whether you will be approaching some of these guys, because they have different recruitment channels. The resources are allocated to higher education marketing. So it's just more difficult to partner with them. On the other hand, we identified some 70 agencies out of these active ones that are promoting on junior, that are focusing on juniors only, at least for the time being. So for junior operators and study tour operators, this is good news. However, for those wishing to approach them, it could be more challenging to establish partnerships with them. Further on, almost 928 agencies promote multiple destinations, so they are quite flexible in terms of adding other countries into their portfolio. And over here, I want to share a couple of heat maps. So this research actually gave us a perspective on which regions or which areas in China are particularly strong or strongly represented for a certain destination or aimed towards marketing and promoting certain destinations. So as you will see, Beijing, this is for the USA. So this is USA heat map. Beijing is very dominant, followed by Guangdong province. So that is Guangzhou and Shenzhen. Then Shanghai, and then the Jiangsu and Shandong, which are neighboring provinces towards the north. They are all basically depicted in the darker color. So the darker the color of province, the more agencies they're promoting a particular destination. So if you are institution from USA, these are the provinces you should start with if you are new to the market. If you already exist there, you might consider the other top 5 or the other top 10 or 15 in this list, where you can further establish your market share in the other regions across China. UK snapshot is similar. So Beijing is largely dominant, followed by Guangdong, Shanghai, and then the Jiangsu province and the Shandong province, interestingly, in the north. So this is just a slight different order in terms of the provinces and the strength of UK as a destination. Slightly different picture is when it comes to Australia. Over here, you will see that the southern province of Guangdong is in fact the most open or the most focused on promoting Australia as a destination by the number of agents having Australia in their portfolio over there. And then it is Jiangsu, Shandong province in the north around Shanghai. So if you are Australians, probably you should head south, but I believe we had them in the morning session, so I would be surprised if we have some over here. However, still interesting comparison how the market differs when it comes to different destinations in correlation to the provinces in China. And lastly, Canada. So for Canadians, it is similar in similar fashion as for Australia. Southern province of Guangdong, very dominant. Followed by the traditional provinces of Jiangsu, Shandong, which have been strong also in the previous destinations. And interestingly, Sichuan province over here, very inward, is equally strong for Canada. And there is very close and cultural ties between cities of Chengdu and Chongqing and other Canadian cities. A lot of activities are organized by the educational sections of the local consulates and embassies of Canada there. So Canada is very active in the region. And we had the opportunity to witness that ourselves when we organized trade missions there, when we brought Canadian educators to meet with local agencies. There was immediately a very strong affinity and will to cooperate in this particular province. So another useful practical takeaway for Canadian educators. To somehow put all this into perspective, as it was probably a lot of data and maybe not so easy to digest at one time, or inviting further questions or clarification, let me just give you a few practical takeaways, what we have learned out of this large nationwide revision of the agent market. Essentially, what we have learned is that the market seems to be bipolar. On one hand, 70%, over 70% of market is dominated by small single office agencies. So on the other hand, you have 30% of the remaining market occupied by the mid-sized, and out of those 30%, 10% being represented the big agencies with a lot of offices and exposure in China. So it basically prompts you to have two sorts of approaches. If you are an educator that is new to the market, that maybe is not very highly ranked or very famous or recognized, because if you would be, you most likely are already in China, and maybe you're probably not attending this session. You would need that information. You're doing well. But if this is you, then you essentially have the opportunity to be very broad, very shotgun in your approach. So to target as many of those 30 tier 1, tier 2 cities or 70 tier 3 cities that we showed on that map. However, you'll have to be busy. You'll have to do a lot of travel, a lot of agency deal making in order to get the few students from each. Cumulatively, you might be seeing interesting numbers, but it will take you a lot of effort and market presence and repeated trips and budget to spend on to develop this market share. On the other hand, if you have a strong value proposition, if you can forge strategic partnerships, if you have something very unique to offer to the market that might pique interest of the big agents, you can be very sniper. So you can literally identify maybe 10, 15 out of those 100 big agencies, according to our classification, and you can follow them, identify the right people, set up the meetings, and lead it towards a strategic partnership or exclusive partnership, if that is your approach. So two types of approaches offer themselves. The other practical information is, as you have witnessed over the past 7 years, there have been over 500 new agencies established in the market. So the market is rapidly changing. What it means for you, again, is that you should probably expect that the current agencies you work with will not be able to maintain the same numbers for you in the future, in the next 3 to 4 years, because it will be more competitive. They will be pressed by these newer agencies, or they might be acquired by a bigger agent, or they might go out of business. So you should do risk management ahead and plan your further 4 to 5 years of recruitment in China and trips and cities that you will be focusing on, especially where a lot of these new ones are being established. So on average, we have some 50 to 80 new agencies being added on annual basis. And why not approach them? Why not see where they are, who they are, and try to establish new partnerships, since you want to keep adding to your portfolio and gradually replacing the ones that might be concluding their life cycle in the market. Otherwise, you should go beyond the tier 1 and tier 2 cities. So as you could see on the map, there is now a significant network of these small agents, and most of them are being located in the tier 3 cities, out of which there is 70 in China. And they are not so frequently visited. In fact, whenever we have educators that we assist to facilitate some meetings there and identify potential partners for them, they are always quite open and even appreciate that actually makes the effort to go to these cities and doesn't necessarily go to Beijing and Shanghai, which is considered always very competitive in their eyes. So you would be even doing them a favor and yourself of establishing new market presence in these regions. So also, I mentioned that you should plan for the next 3 to 4 years, because the market will be changing. It will be evolving. At the moment, it is at the stage of a free market competition. So after 2017, the market became deregulated, which was very big thing, very revolutionary, because as of 2012 until 2017, no agencies could be legally established unless they deposited a significant amount of security money into government account in order to be able to repay the students if they ever face bankruptcy. For that, they were granting the license from the Ministry of Education. So this essentially kept a small, transparent market out of a couple of hundreds, like 500-600 agents over these years that had a license. And on the other hand, there was a big shady market around it with hundreds of agents that could not afford to have such a license and were operating in the dark or had to lease the license in exchange for proportion of the commission that they earned with the big agents. So this became abolished as of 2017. Anybody can establish an agency simply with a business license. And this promotes a free market competition, and so sort of made the best one win, made the most transparent agency win. And that's why these big guys are suddenly losing market share, because these new agents are hungry. They want to become very customer oriented. They want to be very transparent, very qualitative. So they are competing. And again, it is only interesting to assume how this will further develop. We expect further consolidation, so more new agencies established, more big agencies losing market share, and more development and push for transparency, which actually associations such as COSA or BOSA are trying to introduce a standardized model to the market, so that there is transparency, so that students and parents know what type of agreements they should be signing, how much commission they should be paying, how much tuition is reasonable to pay, and so on. Lastly, leverage data and in-country support. If you are either new educators trying to enter the market, and like I said, it could be quite overwhelming for the newcomers, but also if you are seasoned and if you are looking to identify new opportunities in the market, then data on this can help. One of the challenges we identified is that there is a lot of resource about the agencies on the internet from all these sources, official, non-official, but most of it is out of date. So you cannot rely that the information you find is reliable and updated, and that's why we have been doing these regular updates of our agent database, so that we can help our clients, our partners succeed in China, either with introduction or with agent research, with strategic advisory, with in-country representation. So that all helps, starting with the data and certain transparency in the market. Over here is just a quick snapshot of the model of the service that we do in the market, since it is known that we provide research-driven assistance. So we essentially help through our data to identify the right agent partners, whether it's China, but also other surrounding markets in Asia or in Europe. So you could see here that out of 564 agencies in particular cities where one of our clients wanted to visit, we were able to schedule meetings with 33 of them. And out of that, upon visiting, and became 20 partners actively for this particular client. So this is a clear expression how data-driven approach helps to facilitate easier market entry and more return on investment for educators. Another platform that is shaping up to be a new future model in the market is the BMI Agent Roadshow. And with that, I would just cordially like to express gratitude for assistance of attendance of colleagues from BMI, with whom we have a strategic partnership when it comes to China. And we are organizing an agent roadshow over there. So BMI is offering its support in the market for educators, while we as a local partner assist with screening and inviting qualitative agencies. And the event will be happening in these three cities, so Hangzhou, Chengdu, and eventually Shenyang over the dates that you can see. So it's essentially a one-week roadshow where you can participate either in all of them or in one particular city. And we will be aiming to connect you with carefully selected agencies from Tier 2 cities only. So those that you don't get the chance to meet regularly when you visit the major Tier 1 cities. So you may consider that. And towards the end, it is our contact information. So in case out of the time limit and constraints for this presentation, or in case there is certain unclarity, or you would want to have questions, or simply the slide and the content, feel free to drop us an email or give us a call. Me and our colleagues will be happy to get in touch and share our experience or provide advisory on your efforts in China. On that note, I would like to thank you for your attendance, and perhaps if there is questions from the audience in the meantime, then I would be happy to answer some. So I'm going to bring up the chat tab. Okay, I noticed that there were some troubles with the audio. I hope it wasn't too inconvenient for everyone. However, we will share the slides and the recording in case you missed on something important. So this will be recorded together with the slides. When it comes to the questions tab, I'm just going to try to load it quickly. Okay, we have questions. I'll start from the top. We have, in fact, we have 5 of them. So first question, will agents from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities be participating in BMI agent fairs in the fall? Yes, they will be. It will be exclusively agencies from Tier 2 cities and also surrounding Tier 3 cities. So we'll be recruiting agents in the particular cities, those 3 cities that you could see. So, and also the surrounding cities within proximity of a train distance or a short flight to make it convenient for agents to appear. So you will have a chance to meet agencies from the particular provinces as well. Another question, what is the best strategy to establish a contact with a mid-size and a large-size Chinese agency? Is it through local fairs, events, or individual approach? Very good question, very practical question. My personal recommendation is it is a combination of both. Agencies do like to attend events and fairs in the market because it gives them a quick overview of what's going on outside of the Chinese market. So what kind of educators are present, what kind of educators want to enter the market. However, it is never entirely enough to establish a lasting partnership. So if you are intending to participate in some of the fairs that will be happening or are already ongoing in the market, you should always combine it with individual approach to follow up with. So meet them at the fair, but also agree to meet them in the office following the fair. You will not lose anything, just a couple of days and a few $100s of extra marketing budget. But you will actually create that natural opportunity to develop a partnership rather than only dedicating 20 minutes to getting some sort of feedback and leaving some sort of impression, which is important. Business in China and partnerships in China are very social, are very people-oriented. People have to trust you. They have to consider you genuine, that you are trustworthy, reliable, that you mean it to stay in the market. But it is not enough only through the fairs. They are a great start to meet a lot of agents and to identify and make up your mind who seem to be the most suitable to follow up and closely partner with. But always do try to follow up with individual approach. Further questions, do you have data on agencies that work with K-12 as well as higher education? Yes, we do. K-12 was not highly covered in this presentation because it is part of the aggregated data that we have been collecting. And for this part of the update, we mainly focus on higher education, which is still the number one segment in the market, and the junior segment, which is growing still very rapidly, in fact, outperforming the growth of the higher education, but not in terms of size. So for K-12, we have specialized data. We have actually a list of particular agencies that are either specialists in K-12 or they dedicate a lot of marketing budget and resources to K-12 education, because we have organized numerous K-12 events in the market, especially for our Canadian association clients, but also from other destinations. So yes, there is a K-12 market in China. Like you could see at the slides, it is robust in 90,000 student weeks combined annually. At the moment, China being #1 market. But they need to be particularly screened and identified. Further on, what is the average commission charge in China? This is a very broad question. It depends what kind of programs you are promoting. Agencies might be expecting anywhere between 2,000–3,000 American dollars all the way to 10,000, depending on the type, ranking of institution and their individual arrangement that they have with the particular agency. When we are talking about the K-12 programs, it is lower by a couple of thousand, and when it comes to junior programs, it is in the area of several hundreds, let's say USD, up to 1,000 and a few hundreds maximum. So depends very much on the program and on the ranking, on the type of the institution that you represent, but also the agency that you are trying to partner with. You should also know that agencies in China are accustomed to commission twice. So they commission their customers, their parents and students, and they commission your institution. So they expect commission from you. So they're double dipping in a sense, just because there is such a strong demand for study abroad. And eventual question, is an organization considered an agent in this study if they are IECA type independent counselors that do not take commissions from universities? It's a good question. It's I would say most of the agencies in China are for profit driven. So that was our distinguishing factor, but we did not exclude any agencies that would not be taking commission. Our survey, the aim of our survey was not to distinguish between for-profit and non-profit agencies, but to identify all of them that are present in the market, that are approachable and that are willing to cooperate with overseas universities. I am sure, and I have met multiple agencies that are non-profit driven, but most of them are, simply because education is such a strong commodity in the market for which the parents are oftentimes willing to pay a symmetric amount of money, which could be a good thing or not so good, depends how you look at it. And I'm going to the chat tab because there has been some communication going on. One more question. Yeah, actually a few questions over there. Let's continue. What method would you recommend for reaching out and finding new agencies? Well, there is multiple approaches. You can do it yourself, so DIY. You can try to put together resources, screen them, determine if they're up to date. I'm talking about registers, yellow pages, catalogs, even official governmental records. But all of them, or like 99% of them, are in Mandarin. So you will require a Mandarin speaker, ideally somebody who has at least some research background or experience to make sure that this is reliable. Otherwise, you can approach specialized consultancies. Like I mentioned, we do that kind of service, but I don't want to be biased over here. There is other institutions in the market that similarly provide such services, such as BOSA, such as GROC, even COSA Association helps in this capacity. So eventually you need to find for yourself what is it that you are looking for and who is able to give you the best offer or the best approach towards your objectives. But it's essentially either do it yourself or to find a specialized company that offers this kind of introductory services in the market. On the other hand, you can also leverage the fairs, like I mentioned, either the BMI event that is happening later in November or some of the ongoing events. Those tend to be a good platform to start with. However, it's the individual approach eventually that makes the difference. What is the trend for the upcoming years? I believe I covered that already, so will not comment second time. Feel free to listen to the recording or send us an email. And yeah, eventually, this particular question, K-12, we received an article stating that there are more and more local schools that offer a Western type of education, which are affecting the market. What would you know about that? Yes, that is true. China has become essentially the #1 market for international schools being established. So those that are importing foreign curriculum and are setting up K-12 curriculum in China. It is a very attractive model for the Chinese parents. You have to understand that for them, it's a combination of the two best factors. They get to educate their child in Western quality education while doing it in China, under their eyes, under their control, without the distance, without the fear for their security, and oftentimes also somewhat more affordable. However, it is debatable because tuitions are really soaring for international schools in China, even to the extent that even foreign expats who have very high salaries no longer can afford to pay such dramatic tuition, which is triggering another interesting trend that local public schools, Chinese public schools, are starting to see first foreign kids to study general K-12 curriculum, which is pretty revolutionary. But there are already first adopter families that are doing that. But speaking of the Chinese families, this is very much the trend. There is now several hundred of international schools in China that are either joint ventures or owned by the educational groups in China, so wholly owned Chinese international schools with foreign curriculum, because there is such a strong market for it. It's gonna possibly double in the foreseeable future, but don't quote me on that. It's only from the research, similar research on this topic that we have also seen being done by the particular institution that is doing this type of research. I can't recall the name, but they are very much studying the Chinese market for the international schools. Very well. I hope I managed to cover all the questions, even if I was speaking a little bit faster. I was just trying to get ahead of the things. So hopefully everyone got something useful out of this session. If not, I apologize one more time for the audio. We will make sure that the slides reach you with the recording. Hopefully it's recognizable and that you will be able to re-listen and immerse yourself. And should you have further questions or be in need of practical information, then drop us an email and we will be able to get in touch with you and to further clarify. So on that note, I really want to thank everyone for their patience. The colleagues from Europe, because of the late hour, and those joining from Canada or the States, because of the time difference and the early hours for them. So hopefully this was useful. Please do join our future webinars. We will definitely keep you informed if we aim to provide similar interesting and practical content. We are all about practical data, whatever can help you to understand markets and succeed. So do get in touch and do stay tuned for more webinars to come from us. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you are. BONARD is logging out for this one. Bye-bye.